Morning, everybody. We're live from the birdhouse, and today we're talking about Orioles. So it's almost time for Orioles to start rolling in. Usually they show up that last week of April, so we're getting there. So this week coming up, you definitely want to pull out that Oriole feeder, make sure it's out, make sure it's full of jelly. We'll tell you all kinds of different little tips and tricks here today about how you can best attract them to your yard. As always, we love to know who's on. You can always say hi in the comments. If you have any questions, you can throw them in there too. And of course, anything you're seeing or hearing, we love to know that as well. I know I was up early this morning and the birds were just singing like crazy early on in the morning. So it's about that time of the year where they're starting to sing quite a bit, be quite vocal, looking for mates. So it's a really exciting time of the year. We do have some things going on here today. We do have a plant sale going on right now. It doesn't seem like a great time to be working in the garden. It's a little raining and rainy and kind of snowy here today. But we do have Michael Hayden here today with selling plants. So that's going on until about 3 o'clock or so today. So you can stop by the birdhouse to see some of the great selection that he has going on there today. And also, next Saturday is a big event here. It's our bird feeder cleaning day. So if you've ever been here during that, you know it's quite a production. Sometimes we get anywhere from 300 to 600 feeders. We do clean them for you for free, so you can drop those off, and you can start dropping those off now. We start taking them the week before, and we're close enough now that if you do want to drop your feeders off early, that's absolutely fine. We have people all that'll be here all week cleaning the feeders, so we'll be taking care of those, and then we'll just call you when they are all done. So that's our bird feeder. The big event is next Tuesday, or excuse me, is next Saturday, which is the 23rd. And you can drop your feeders off now for that. And that's absolutely free. We will be closed tomorrow for Easter. I thought I would just throw that in there too, just in case you're planning out your weekend and what day to come in. We will be closed tomorrow for Easter. So just keep that in mind. And before we get started with the Orioles, I thought I would show you a new product we have because it's something we've never had before. It's never been commercially available before to buy. But for those of you that have bluebirds and bluebird houses and you've had issues with sparrows, we've always talked about sparrow spookers or sparrow scarers, and now we do have some for sale. So in the past, you've had to just make your own, which hasn't been super convenient for everybody, but now we do have some super easy. They come almost fully assembled. You just screw them in to the top of the house and you're good to go. So those are to be put on once the bluebird has laid their first egg. Once they've laid an egg in the house, you can assemble the sparrow scarer on top of your birdhouse, and that will help scare sparrows away. So we do have them now for sale, and best off, they're made right here in Rochester, New York. So you can support local and scare those sparrows away. So no further ado, we'll talk today about attracting Orioles. So one question we get quite often is, what are my chances of getting Orioles? And the answer to that is pretty good. If you put out the right things for them, your odds of getting them are quite good. In the past few years, people have had better luck attracting Orioles than they have even hummingbirds. So they like a whole bunch of different habitat that is suitable for humans as well. So you're probably living in an area that will get Orioles. So we'll get started here. First, let's look at the migration map. So as we're getting on into migration season here, I always like to check out this. This is a website called Birdcast. So if you're familiar with this or unfamiliar with this, this is a really great resource. This is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they predict what migration events are going to look like based on weather patterns and all that kind of stuff. So it's really neat to see what the predicted migration is for certain areas. And as we get on into the season and get into May, the migration will be quite high in our area. Right now, it's pretty low, but as we go on, it'll get the map will grow more and more yellow, which means there's more and more migration happening and coming through the area. So looks like there's going to be quite a bit of migration happening around the Gulf Coast there. So those birds are going to be flowing up and flowing into our area, including the Orioles. So they're not here yet, but they're on their way. And this birdcast website is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. We can go right on that site anytime, and it'll have maps for 3 days out. So here are the migration maps coming up for the next couple days. So it's really starting to ramp up down south. Not too much here yet, but it's only a matter of time. So let's talk about Orioles. So there's 2 different species that we have here in Rochester and upstate New York. If you're on the West Coast, there's more of a diversity of Orioles. There's different species, but you're going to use the same exact types of things to attract them. So the Baltimore Oriole is here. This is what you are most likely to get in your backyard. This is the one out of the 2 species that's going to be the more common. And this is the male on the left here, that bright, beautiful orange male. This is the Baltimore Oriole male. And then on the right here is the female. And the juveniles look quite a bit like the female as well once they have fledged and left the nest. So if you see something that's Oriole sized, but it's not bright, bright orange, it's probably just a female. And so you can get either of them coming to your feeders. So that is the Baltimore Oriole, and this is their range map. So if you look at the range map here, the blue is where they spend the winter. So that's their non-breeding range. So they'll be in Mexico, Central America, and the tip of South America, in Cuba, and even in Florida for the winter. And then they will migrate up into our area here. And that is where their breeding range is. So that's where they find a mate. That's where they build their nests, lay their eggs. So they'll spend the whole summer here. Usually they start to go back down south around late August or so. By Labor Day, people really aren't seeing them anymore. Same with the hummingbirds. So they are here all summer long. Now, another species we have here is the orchard oriole. So this isn't as common of a backyard bird. In fact, they're pretty but every year we do have people that get them in their yards. So it's really just kind of like a darker version of the Baltimore Oriole. That Baltimore Oriole is bright, bright orange. And the orchard Oriole is more of almost like a rust colored. So very quite a bit darker in color. And the females look pretty similar to that female Baltimore Oriole, but this is another species you just might get coming to your feeders. You never know, especially early on in the season when these birds are migrating in. They're super hungry. So birds that don't necessarily come to feeders quite often, you can sometimes find at your feeders, which is always exciting when we're in the height of migration season. You guys get really, really cool things coming into your yard. So this is the orchard Oriole. And then this is the juvenile. The juvenile looks quite a bit different. So I thought I'd share a photo of that. They have that really dark colored throat. And this is their range map here. It's pretty similar to that of the Baltimore Oriole. They're usually not found as far south as the Baltimore Oriole. But you can see we're almost just at the tippy top of their range here for their breeding range. So the orchard Orioles are seen more around the lakeshore. You can find them there quite often. That's going to be a common place where you can find them. So this is your orchard Oriole. And Orioles, as far as their habitat goes, they tend to be found high up in trees. And so they can be hard to see right away, but you can usually hear them. I know I usually hear Orioles first before I see them, hear their high-pitched whistle, and then have to look up in the tree. So their sound, their call sounds like this. So we've had some people say that they think they're hearing the Orioles already. It's probably not Orioles. We're still a little bit early for them, but it could be something like a blackbird. The Orioles are in the blackbird family, so red-winged blackbirds sometimes have this really clear, high-pitched whistle, so they can sometimes sound like Orioles. And then don't forget mockingbirds. Mockingbirds can be quite tricky, and they do mimic the calls of other birds. So you might be hearing a mockingbird making the call of an Oriole, but Orioles do have a really clear, high-pitched whistle. I'll play it for you again. So that's a sound we will be hearing soon. So they're usually found pretty high up in trees, and they like open woodland or forest edges. So it's not a bird that you're typically going to find deep in the woods, but they do like that edge habitat. So that transitional habitat between trees and an open area. So that's perfect for a backyard bird. That's why they're so common in backyards. They will forage for insects and fruits and bushes and shrubs, and then they will also drink nectar from blooming trees, especially. So if you have a tree that's in bloom, keep your ears open for that whistle of the Oriole. And if you hear it, don't be surprised, because they do really like to drink that nectar from the blooms of blooming trees, especially. So then in the spring and in the fall, they will drink a lot of nectar. They'll eat fruits. And then in the summer, when there's lots of insect material, they will switch their diet to lots of insects. So one question we get all the time as we move on into the season is, where did my Orioles go? So people will get them early on in the season. They've got their feeders out. They're getting all kinds of Orioles. And then all of a sudden, usually around late June or so, they just disappear, and people go, where did they go? They must have gone back down south. They're still here, but they tend to change their diet to more of insect material. So instead of going to that really sweet sugary stuff like the nectar and the jelly, they're switching more to insects. So we've found that later on in the season, if you provide mealworms for them, that can help keep them around. Not only will the adults eat them, but they need those to feed their young. So their young are only in the nest for a couple weeks, so they need lots of insect protein and material to grow big and grow quickly. So if you do feed them mealworms as we go on in the season, that can really help keep them coming to your backyard. And then ultimately, if you do just keep your regular feeders out, if you just want to do the jelly and the nectar and the orange thing, they will ultimately tend to come back. Once the young have fledged and once they've left the nest, they tend to bring them to feeders and kind of show them where they can get some food. They'll grab a beakful of jelly and feed the young right at the feeder. So that's always fun to see. So it can take some patience. It can be frustrating when they disappear, but mealworms, absolutely. If you switch to that, you'll see that you tend to get them, the Orioles, coming pretty regularly all summer long. If you are on our email list, we will send you out an email when it's a good time to switch to mealworms, because it happens all at once. It seems like the Orioles arrive all at once. They all start nesting all at once. It's been pretty predictable. So we will keep you informed of that. And as far as their nesting goes, they build a really neat looking hanging pendulum nest. The female will choose the nest site within a territory, and she'll start the nest building process. So the male doesn't really contribute to the nest building process. Sometimes they'll bring some nesting material, but in general, it's just the female that will weave this very intricate nest. And it usually hangs on a branch. Sometimes it's on the trunk of a tree, but most of the time you'll see it hanging out on a branch. Right now is a really good time to look for these from last year because we don't have any leaves coming out on the trees yet. So you might see some of these hanging from trees right now. If you go out on a hike, you can usually find some Oriole nests. They're going to be this pendulous nests that are kind of usually hanging quite out in the open where you can see them pretty well. And they're about 3 to 4 inches deep, 2 to 3 inches wide. And that's where she will lay her eggs. And the whole process takes about a week, anywhere from like 6 to 11 days or so. And it's weather dependent. If the weather isn't very good, like on a day like today, it would kind of delay the process. So it just takes them a little bit longer if the weather isn't very good. Now, last year, one of our customers, Chris, was very lucky to get her eye on an Oriole building its nest. So every day she was taking pictures of the progression of the nest building process. So this is really cool. Here's a female that's grabbing some nesting material. So you can see they like that kind of fibrous material. So here she is gathering. And then here is the beginning of the nest. So you can see here is like the little frame of it. And with each day, there was more and more added. So this was day 3, I believe, and you can see her little head poking out of the nest there. And then as it went on, it started to get its shape there until the nest was complete. So really cool that she was able to capture that process. So very, very neat. So that is the Oriole nest building process. And as far as their clutch size goes, so the clutch is going to be the size of how many eggs they lay. The clutch is anywhere from 3 to 7 eggs. And usually the older, more mature the bird is, the more eggs they'll lay. They only have one brood per year, so one set of eggs is laid every year. And the incubation time is anywhere from 11 to 14 days. So once those eggs are laid, the female's sitting on that nest for about 2 weeks, sometimes a little less. And then once those eggs hatch, it is the nestling period, and that's the baby birds, how long they're in the nest for. So they're only in the nest for another 2 weeks, sometimes not even that long. So they go from just being hatched to out in the world within 2 weeks, which is pretty incredible. And so that's why they need just so much insect protein in order to grow so fast. So that's why the mealworms are important. And when they're feeding their nestlings, they tend to feed them kind of more of fleshy insects, if you would. Caterpillars are a big thing for them. They tend not to feed them really hard-shelled insects like beetles and that kind of thing. Not until they're older. They don't eat that kind of thing. So they depend on a lot of those soft-bodied insects. There's a couple more nests here of Orioles, so they're really cool, interesting looking nests. And how do you attract Orioles? They're pretty easy to attract. There are simple things that you can put out in order to get them. First is suet, which is kind of different. You don't necessarily think of Orioles coming to suet, but they do, especially when they're first coming in. They're really hungry. They've been flying all night. They do these migration events in the evening, which is pretty neat. So when they arrive to a place in the morning to kind of settle down, they're super hungry. So they will eat suet, especially orange suet. And what's great about the orange suet is that the woodpeckers will still eat it too, but the Orioles tend to like it as well. So a lot of people will switch to orange suet this time of the year in order to hopefully get some more Orioles and also keep all their woodpeckers. Oranges they like, so you can slice up oranges and feed it to them. They'll drink nectar, but the thing they really love the most is the jelly. So they love grape jelly. And then mealworms, especially as you go later on in the season. So they are common feeder birds. Here is the that they like. So this one is called Orange Essence. This is one of our better sellers here. Super basic. It's just an orange flavored suet, and the Orioles will eat that. So that's the one that we recommend here if you're trying to get them. And then oranges. So you can cut up oranges, you can slice them in half, you can put them in slices. Most Oriole feeders will have little pegs on them in some way where you can put the oranges on. And one question we get a lot too is, how often do I have to change out the oranges? Are the oranges going to go bad? And the answer to that is, if you have Orioles coming, they usually don't have a chance to go bad. The Orioles will go through them so quickly. So I would change them out every few days or so just to be safe, just like you do with your nectar. But as soon as the Orioles come, they make quick work of the oranges. They will drink nectar, and so you can make your own nectar using sugar and water if you'd like. The recipe is 1 part sugar to 5 parts water, so it tends to be not as sweet as hummingbird nectar is. That being said, they're not super picky, so if you are making nectar for your hummingbirds, you can usually use that in your Oriole feeder just fine. But we also have mixes that you can use. We have some that are just concentrates. You just add water to. They're super simple. And if you're familiar with the Sweet Seed company that makes lots of hummingbird nectar, they've started doing more Oriole nectar too. So now they have these little ready to use pouches that you can just pour right into your feeder, which are super easy to use. So last year they just had them in a bottle form. Now they have these little pouches here, which you can use if you're just kind of testing out the nectar thing, or they have bigger pouches like this that have the little spigot on it. So easy to fill with your feeders. So you fill your feeders, and then you can just stick this in the fridge, and you don't have to do any kind of boiling water or anything like that. So that's a brand new product for this year. So we're excited about that. And you want to make sure that you change your nectar out pretty frequently. It can go bad. It can just get moldy, especially if it's out in the sun, and it's getting a lot of sunlight, it's getting hot, it can go bad. So you do want to make sure that you clean your nectar out every 2 or 3 days or so. If it's in the shade, sometimes you can get away with, maybe 4 days, but you just want to make sure that it's not just sitting out there for a long time. So that is your nectar. And you don't want to use any dyes either. I should mention that with Oriole nectar or hummingbird nectar, sometimes, especially with hummingbird nectar, people will dye it red. But it's not known if the dye can harm the birds in any way. So you just want to steer clear of that just to be safe. The birds don't need it to be a certain color. The color of the feeder will attract them just fine. So you don't need to color the nectar. And you want to make sure that you keep the feeder clean. So there are little brushes you can get to clean those feeding ports. You can use pipe cleaners. It doesn't have to be anything really fancy, but you want to make sure that you do keep them clean. If you see any kind of little like black substance forming around the feeding ports, that's mold. That's not good for them. So you do want to make sure that you keep that feeder clean. And then there's the jelly. So the jelly, if you're only feeding one type of thing to the Orioles, the jelly is absolutely the way to go. And the thing we sell the most of is this birdberry jelly. It doesn't have any artificial flavors, preservatives, corn sweeteners. So that's great for the birds. And it's a mix of grape and blackberry, which they seem to really, really love. If you are feeding them, jelly, if you go to the supermarket and buy jelly, just make sure that there's no corn syrup or anything like that in there. Usually in the organic section, you can find something that works. Every year, as soon as the Orioles hit, the store is always out of jelly, but we do have a whole bunch of birdberry jelly here if you'd like some jelly for the Orioles. So that's by far the thing that they seem to like the most. And then mealworms. So we were talking about switching out to mealworms, providing them with mealworms. And there's 2 different types you can get. You can get freeze-dried mealworms or you can get live mealworms. Birds prefer the live mealworms, but they will eat the freeze-dried mealworms. You can, if you get the freeze-dried mealworms, if you spray them with water or soak them in a little bit of water, that can help. They kind of absorb that and they look a little bit more lively. So mealworms are fantastic for these. This is a picture of an Oriole here picking off some tent caterpillars. So they do eat lots and lots of insects. So as far as the live mealworms go, if you do feed those, remember you're supposed to keep them in your refrigerator. So I know that's not for everybody, but that is something you should do just because they are a beetle larva. So nothing bad will happen if you don't keep them in the refrigerator. You might just get these mealworms pupating and becoming beetles. So it's not the end of the world, but they just last longer if you keep them in a refrigerator. There's lots of different types of feeders, and the difference, people ask a lot, what's the difference between an Oriole feeder and a hummingbird feeder? So say you're feeding nectar, what's the difference? The main difference, well, there's 2 actually. With Oriole feeders, they have bigger perches. So with hummingbird feeders, they don't always have perches on them because the hummingbirds will just hover and feed from them. So the Orioles need a place to sit and perch, so they do have larger perches on them. And then the feeding ports are going to be bigger. If you look at your hummingbird feeders, usually the feeding ports are quite small because the hummingbirds just have that tiny little beak, so they don't need a large feeding port in order to stick their beak into to feed. But the Orioles are larger and they have a larger beak. So the feeding ports, if you have a feeder for Orioles that provides nectar, is going to have larger holes. So we hear stories all the time about Orioles trying to get into hummingbird feeders and they're unsuccessful because the feeding ports are too small. Hummingbirds will sometimes come to Oriole feeders. They'll feed from them just fine. So we hear about that all the time too. So that's going to be the main difference. This feeder on the left here is our best-selling feeder in the whole store. It's called the Oriole Fest. Many of you probably have this. It's really, really easy to fill. There's these little ports on the top, like little indentations, that's where you put the jelly. You can spear an orange on the little stick on the middle here, just like this picture here from one of our customers. And you can put nectar inside. So you can give them all of their foods all in one place. So it's very convenient. And now it comes with nectar guards to keep bees and wasps out. And I'll tell you about those as we go on. But that's a really good feature. So this is our best seller. There's a larger version of it here that holds even more oranges and jelly and nectar. But we've got all kinds of different Oriole feeders for you here. Some of them have built-in roofs, which is really nice. These have those little built-in roofs. And the idea there is people like this, and they'll add weather guards to their feeders, because if it's rainy, if it's a day like today, the nectar can get washed out pretty easily, the nectar and the jelly. So the jelly can get pretty waterlogged, and the birds tend not to come to it as often if that's the case. So just helps preserve your jelly. These two feeders here don't provide nectar, but it's a combination of oranges and jelly. And if you're just going to do two different types of food, this is what I would do. I would do the oranges and the jelly, because the nectar they will drink, but it seems to be the thing that they go for the least out of what everybody has told us here at the store. So we've got a couple different feeders here. Most of them have a little stick on the side of them somewhere where you can spear your oranges. So that's what these little pieces are here. You can stake your oranges right on the side of the feeders like this. And they have nice big large cups too. So you can fill them with jelly early in the season, and then you can always switch to mealworms later on. And this is a cute little one here. It looks like a little flower. Super, super simple. You can fill the cup with jelly. Looks like this, and then there's just these little spokes on it here, and that's where you stick your oranges. So you don't have to do anything super elaborate in order to attract them. I like this feeder here a lot. This one has 2 cups in it, and what a lot of people do is early in the season fill them both with jelly, but then as the season goes on, they'll fill one with jelly and then one with mealworms. So you can give them both of those, and oranges as well. So this one's very popular. It's all made out of recycled materials. It's got a weather guard roof on the top. So that one is awesome. I love that one. Here's another picture of that here. So lots of different feeders. And of course, there's accessories for the feeders as well. And they all serve some kind of a purpose. There's weather guards. And most people who don't get a weather guard at first ultimately tend to come back and get one. Again, the main reason is that the rain can wash away the jelly. It can dilute the nectar, because if you do have that Oriole feeder with the larger feeding ports in it for the nectar, it's easy for the rain to get in there. So feeder accessories like these weather guards are really popular because of that. It'll just help preserve the food and keep the food longer. So we've got a couple different types of weather guards. If you don't like the orange, we have clear ones too, and people will use the now, and then in the winter they'll use them to cover their other tube feeders to keep snow off, so they can be multi-purpose. And here's a photo that was sent into us last year of an Oriole hanging out on a rainy day underneath its little weather guard. So love this picture. I thought I would show it. So it also gives them a little place to shelter in case of inclement weather. Ant motes. So this is something that can be a problem, especially as we go on in the season. There's more and more insects out there, and they will find your feeders quite easily. So ants definitely will come to hummingbird feeders. They come to Oriole feeders. They like the nectar. They like the oranges. They like the jelly. You can easily keep them out with one of these contraptions. It's not anything elaborate. It's just a little cup that you fill with water, and then you hang your feeder underneath it. And the idea is when the ants are crawling down to get to your feeder, they can't get around that water in order to get down to the feeder. So it'll keep them away. So these are called ant motes. And some feeders have built-in ant motes. So like this Oriole Fest, for example. And if you have hummingbird feeders that are this dish style, they might have the same feature. There's a little space here in between the hanger and the feeder, and you can fill this with water. So that's an ant moat right there. I've found with these that sometimes, because it's not that big of a space, you can get an ant or two that can float across that are lucky enough to to get across, and they can evaporate kind of quickly because it doesn't hold that much water. So you might end up wanting to add a larger ant moat. And we get pictures sent in to us all the time of birds like goldfinches and chickadees even using these as a place to drink, as like a little bird bath. So that's fun too. So these are called ant moats, one way to keep them out of feeders, either your nectar feeders or jelly feeders. And then we have this product that's called Nectar Fortress. And this is a little tube of gel, and the gel smells like cinnamon and clove. And they just don't like that smell. There's something about that smell that repels them. So Patty here at the store swears by this. She uses this all the time. You just put a little line, a little ring around your pole where you've got your nectar feeder, and the ants won't cross it. So another simple way to keep them out. You do have to reapply, but not all that often. So this is called Nectar Fortress. Another thing you can do to keep, another thing you can use to keep those insects out. And then we were talking about how often you have to change your nectar, and you should change it out every, 2, 3, 4 days. But there is a product called Feeder Fresh that's made for hummingbird nectar and Oriole nectar that you can add just a little bit to your nectar, and it'll keep it fresh for more like a week or 10 days. So you don't have to change it out as often. So this is a product that's super popular because you don't have to change your nectar as often. So it's just a little bottle. This will easily last you a season. So you just add a tiny little bit to your nectar, and it'll keep it fresh longer. It's just some natural micronutrients that will keep that nectar fresh, and it's made specifically for birds, so it doesn't harm them in any way. And here are the bee guards, which are now a feature of the Oriole Fest feeder. This is the only feeder that's made at the moment that has the bee guards. So that won't keep bees out of your jelly or your orange, but it will keep them from getting to the nectar inside the feeder. And the idea with the nectar guard tips, and they make these for hummingbird feeders too. So if you have a hummingbird feeder, you might be able to get these accessories that you can add to that, depending on which kind you have. They're just these little rubber tips here. And I don't know if you can see it there, but in the picture you can kind of see it, that there's a little hole in it that the birds can poke their beak through. So you rip one of these off, and then it goes on the inside of your feeder where the little feeding port is, and the birds can poke through it with their beaks. So they can poke through that little rubber tip to get to the nectar, but bees and wasps can't. So they just have short little tongues, so they can't penetrate this to get into the feeder and get to the nectar. So that is one way to keep them out, and that's for the Oriole Fest feeder. The one I was saying is our bestseller. So this really, it is the only one that I'm aware of that has this. So if you do have the feeder already, you can get the bee guards separate for it. So that's one way to keep the bees and wasps out. Another way is with one of these contraptions. It's almost looks like a paper lantern. And these are a decoy. It's a simulated wasp nest or a wasp scarer. And the idea with these is that they mimic bald-faced hornets' nests. If you ever see those big gray paper wasp nests, those are from the bald-faced hornets. And if you've ever had an experience with them, you might have found that they are quite nasty, and other insects don't like them either. So the idea with these is you hang it up by your feeder, and bees and wasps will see it and think that there's already some bald-faced hornets around, and they don't want to mess with them. Bald-faced hornets will attack wasps and bees, and they will stay away. So we've gotten great reviews about these working really, really well to keep the bees and wasps away from your feeder. So because feeders are such easy food, it probably won't keep every single bee and wasp away, but it can make a significant improvement. So these are just little fake wasp nests are only $5, and you can hang them by your feeder to keep them away. One other thing you can do is make a really sugary solution. So with your normal Oriole recipe, it's 1 part sugar to 5 parts water. If you do something that's more like 1-to-1, like a simple syrup, 1 part sugar to 1 part water, and make it very, very sweet, and put that somewhere else, like put it in a little dish and put it somewhere else in your garden, the bees and wasps will tend to go there and leave your feeder alone. So that's something else you can do. And a combination of all of these will really help keep that activity down at your feeder. Early in the season, it's not so much of an issue. Like right now, if you put out the feeders, you might see some insects around it, but it's really later on in the season as our hives grow larger and there's more individuals out there that it can be a real problem. So that's always something you can add to your setup as we go on in the season. And finally, once you put up your Oriole feeder, you might find you're getting birds that aren't Orioles at all. So you never know what you'll see coming to your Oriole feeder. Last year, I had a cardinal eating the jelly out of my Oriole feeder, which I've never seen before. The birds don't read the labels of your feeder, so they don't care. And you might get birds like this one, the gray catbird is a really common visitor that will come to Oriole feeders, especially if you have jelly out. They will eat that. They are in the same family as a mockingbird, so they do mimic the calls of other birds. And then at the end, they have a sound that almost sounds like a meow, so that's how they get their name. So this is the gray catbird. And you might also get a mockingbird. People get mockingbirds coming to their oranges, especially. They seem to like those. So these are two pretty common visitors you might get coming to your Oriole feeder, so don't be surprised if you see them. They're not going to be your typical backyard bird that comes to a seed feeder, but they do like the jelly and the oranges. And then there's other birds that'll just randomly eat the jelly too. This was sent in to us last year of a chickadee eating some jelly there. House finches sometimes will eat the jelly. And then somebody sent in this photo too. So I don't know if the hummingbird was going after the jelly or if there were little insects hanging around. The hummingbird might have been picking those off from the feeder. So you never know what you're going to get when you put out the Oriole feeder. And that's the fun of it, especially during migration time. So in conclusion here, we recommend getting your feeders out early before you see or hear any Orioles. So by the 3rd week of April, it's a good time to put out that feeder. So this coming week, it's a great time to put that out because they tend to start rolling in around the 4th week of April. So by next weekend, definitely make sure that you have that Oriole feeder out. We will let you know as soon as any have been spotted in the area. Usually they all show up on the same day, but definitely this coming week, get that Oriole feeder out and be prepared. Stock up on jelly because it does run out, especially during these times. Nothing is guaranteed, so definitely stock up on jelly. If you do go through a lot of birdberry jelly, we do have a case special on these too. You can buy 12 and get 1 for free. So just like our suet, we do a baker's dozen on the jelly. Add a weather guard, because if you don't originally, you'll probably end up doing it later anyway. And later in the season, switch to mealworms. And that is your best chance of getting the Orioles all season long, all summer long. If you don't want to do the mealworm thing, I understand, but keep your feeders out because once those young have left the nest, they'll come back most of the time to feed from your feeders again before migrating back down south. So that is everything we have prepared for you today. If you have any questions, absolutely put them in the comments. We will have another broadcast on Tuesday where we'll share your photos and your sightings. There's been lots of fun birds rolling into the area, so we'll have that coming up for you Tuesday. And let's see who's on. We have Bob here. He says, good morning, Bluebird update. We now have 3 eggs laid over the past 4 days. First egg was laid on Wednesday. I've had some pine siskins over the past few days too. Finally saw the eastern phoebe that has been singing and singing. Yes, so I always bring this one up because it's so much fun. If you have the Merlin Bird ID app, this doesn't show it very well. It's free, which is wonderful. And now they have a feature where it will identify bird songs for you. And so if you hear a bird calling, you just click Sound ID, and it'll listen to what birds you're hearing, and it'll let you know what they are. So that's really a great feature. And Bob has been hearing the Phoebe. And let's pull up the call of the Phoebe, because that's a pretty distinctive one. And it sounds like the bird is saying Phoebe. So this is the call of the Eastern Phoebe. So it almost sounds like Phoebe. And so the Phoebe is a type of flycatcher. There's some different types that we have around in the area. Some of them can look really, really similar to one another, but their calls can be quite different. So Bob not only has bluebirds nesting in his box that have eggs, but he's got some Phoebes and pine siskins. Really neat. Pine siskins, they almost look like goldfinches, but they're more striped, and you can get them coming to your Niger feeders. So they really like the Niger seed. If you have sunflower hearts out in some kind of feeder, they'll come to those too. Cindy is on. Good morning, Cindy. She says, thank you for the great pictures of the Oriole nest being built. Pretty amazing. Yes, it's not every day you get to see the progress of a bird nesting. And the females tend to nest around the same location every year too. So that's a question we get often is, I had Orioles nesting last year. Are they going to come back? They probably will. The females are known to nest. They'll sometimes reuse their old nests, but a lot of the times they'll build new, sometimes in the same tree, sometimes in a tree close to where they were the year before. And the young tend to come back to around the place that they were hatched to nest. So you might just get to see some more of this nest building activity. If you know where some nests are right now, keep your eyes out on those trees, because you might get to see the progression like this happen day over day of the nest building. So really cool thing to see. Lynn is on, and she says, hi, I have a good amount of the Oriole jelly left from last year. I've kept it in my fridge over the winter. Can I use it now? Does it go bad? Really good question. It should still be good. It's just kind of like any other jelly you would get at the store. As long as you kept it in the refrigerator, it should be just fine. I would just open it up and just make sure there's no mold or anything like that in there. As long as there's no mold, it smells fine, you should be perfectly fine to use that. Let's see. Randy says, good morning, everybody. He says, is the Oriole Nectar flavored orange? So there are some that are, like the powder I know is, and the sweet seed nectar. So this new type that we've been getting in is citrus infused, which is very fancy. So yes, they do have orange flavoring to them. So this has been a really popular product with hummingbirds, and it's also a local company. They're just out of Syracuse too. So this is the Sweet Seed Company. They make the ready-to-use nectar. They make concentrates you can just add water to. And they are infused with electrolytes and that kind of thing too. So it's good for the birds. There's calcium in there too, which helps their bones, especially after the egg laying. The females will lose some calcium with that egg laying process. So it does have some of that in there too. And Rich is on. He says, good morning. Welch's Natural Concord Grape Spread has no high fructose corn syrup, just sugar. We use it when we run out of birdberry jelly. So that's a good tip right there from Rich. The Welch's Natural Concord Grape Spread. Bob says, and the gray catbirds love. You might get more than just the Orioles. Cindy says the ant moat is rather neat. Looks easy to use. It is very easy to use. You just fill them with water and you hang your feeder from it. So really, really simple. I can pull up the picture of that again. Yeah, these are the ant moats here. So fill it with water, hang your feeder from it, and you're good to go. Let's see. Jill says, do Orioles eat blood oranges? Yeah, they'll eat blood oranges. Yeah, you can put those out. They'll eat clementines. It doesn't have to be your typical orange. I'll use clementines. If I have a blood orange, I'll throw that out there too. But yeah, I've had them eat that. Ed says, thought we had a female Baltimore Oriole earlier this week, but it turned out to be a female red-winged blackbird. Sneaky, sneaky. The clue was the beak, which is darker and more pointy in the red-winged blackbird. Otherwise, they look very similar. Thanks, Sibley Guide. Yeah, it can be tricky. The Orioles are in the blackbird family along with red-winged blackbirds and grackles, and they can look similar. Patricia says, I can't keep sparrows out of my 3 bluebird houses. Disappointed. This is a common issue that people have. It can be very hard to keep them out. I did show earlier, we do now have sparrow scarers or sparrow spookers that you can buy to help with that. But the placement, the time of the placement is important. So if you don't have bluebirds that are coming into the house at all, it can be hard to keep the sparrows out. Sparrows aren't protected, so you can remove their nest, you can remove their eggs. The key to having the sparrow scarers work is to, once the bluebirds have laid an egg in that house, put it up right away, and that will help keep the sparrows away. So sparrows don't like shiny, reflective objects, and so this makes it so that flaps around in the wind and it'll scare them away. But the bluebirds, once they've established their nest and there's an egg in there, they won't abandon it. So that's how these things work. So we just this morning got them in, and so we do have them now for sale here at the store. So they're $14.95, and they're made right here in Rochester. So even better. Let's see. Cindy says, thank you for the presentation. You're very welcome. Ralph says, good morning from Ralph and Victor. Good morning, Ralph. And Lynn says, I've been really enjoying Merlin. It told me I have an eastern bluebird in my area, though I have yet to see it. Yeah, so in the morning, if you get up early and you're hearing all these birds make a ruckus, I would suggest putting on Merlin, seeing what's around, because you never know, especially when it's early in the morning. These birds migrate overnight. And so they'll just kind of sit and rest and relax. So you might have some really, really interesting things just in your backyard that you had no idea about. Stephanie says, thank you so much for the information. I saw my first Oriole last year and was so excited. I'm hoping to attract them this year to into my backyard. Yeah, and if you put out the right things and put it out early, you should have pretty good luck with doing that. So hopefully you'll get more this year. Let's see. Cindy says, Liz, you showed us the picture of the bluebird house built with a rectangular opening that can help also. Yes. So this is to help keep sparrows out. We do have a sparrow resistant bluebird house, and it does have a rectangular opening instead of a circular opening. And the idea there is that sparrows prefer a circular entrance hole, and bluebirds don't mind one that's rectangular. And then also it has a shallow nesting cavity. So sparrows like a deep nesting cavity. Bluebirds don't mind one that's shallow. So it's just not the specifications that they prefer in a nesting habitat. So people have had decent luck with that, but just like everything else, it's not 100%. Claudia is on. She says, a rose-breasted grosbeak just showed up. I am in Western PA. Woo! So this is very exciting. So Claudia is getting a sneak peek of what we're going to have. So the rose-breasted grosbeaks usually show up around the same week as the Orioles do. So they are in the cardinal family. So if you're attracting cardinals successfully, you have very good luck of attracting the rose-breasted grosbeaks. And they like sunflower seed, so black oil sunflower seed. They like safflower, sunflower hearts, but they need perching room. So that's the key. So you want to make sure you have a tray feeder out or a feeder with large perches so they have enough room to land and to feed. So rose-breasted grosbeak, how cool. So we'll be there soon, but no rose-breasted grosbeak spotted here yet, but soon. Laurel says, is it time to put out Oriole feeders or wait a week? So we recommend by April 24th or so, that last week of April, they come back around the same time every year. Even if we're having a mild winter and an early spring, it doesn't change the time that they come. They come around the same time every year. And it makes sense because they have a long distance to travel. So there's no really expedited way for them to get here quickly. They can't hop on a plane and get here earlier if the weather is nice. So they will come back around the same time every year. And here, that's going to be the last week of April. So we recommend putting out your feeders sometime this week. Definitely by next weekend, you want to make sure that they're out because they will be here soon. So now's a great time to pull them out of your closet, make sure that they're clean, and get them filled and out in your yard. So that is Laurel's question. That looks like that is everybody's questions for today. We'll be back on Tuesday with another live broadcast. We have our plant sale going on today. There's some really cool things out there. He's got lots of hellebores. He's got some bloodroot and jack in the pulpits. So if you're into planting native, there's a really good selection of native plants that are out there today. Next Saturday, we have our bird feeder cleaning day event. So feel free to bring in your bird feeders any day this next week, and we will get them cleaned for free and call you when they're done. So we've got that going on too. Absolutely send in photos. If you have any photos that you've snapped, we love to see those. We've got some really cool ones that have come in that we'll share with you on Tuesday on our next live broadcast, and that'll be at the same place here, wherever you're viewing now, and that'll be at 10 a.m. in the morning, and so we will see you then. And just a reminder that we will be closed on Easter Sunday, so just so you can plan accordingly. So everybody have a great weekend, and we will see you on Tuesday. Goodbye.